It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Support for this podcast comes from Invent Together. I bet you didn't know that inventing activity by Black inventors peaked in 1899, and it has never recovered. Black and Hispanic college graduates patented half the rate of white college graduates. That's just one of the reasons why you need to know about Invent Together. When our patent system gets more diverse, our nation will get stronger and more successful. Find out how you can help diverse inventors and unleash economic opportunity at inventtogether.org.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Sooners Nation, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Sooners podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Country Leisure. Are you ready to get your relaxation on, create your backyard oasis? Well, contact the people at Country Leisure at 405-799-7745. Located in Moore, Oklahoma, off of I-35. Call or text them us, 405-799-7745. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. And joining me today is former Oklahoma Sooners offensive lineman and former Arkansas graduate assistant women's basketball coach, David Walker. You can follow David on Twitter at D_Walk74. Hey, David, I'm sorry I never included that in your credentials, man. That, especially for basketball season, that's pretty big time. I mean, it gives us a little more credibility here.
Well, here's the deal. It's funny you mentioned that today because I sat at a Buffalo Wild Wings with a split screen right in front of me, some mango habanero wings, watching OU and Gonzaga, and then watching Arkansas and Wright State. And the Lady Backs took a loss to a Cinderella as a 13 seed. Wright State took down Arkansas as a 4 seed. So I took 2 L's at the same time basically today as I sat there. But hey, my wings went down nice, so that part was good. I was solid on the wings.
Yeah, you're a good 1 and 2 at that point.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you're at Buffalo Wild Wings at B-Dubs, it's never a bad time. If your team's losing, it's a little bit less of a good time, but I don't know. Hey, I gotta give you credit for even braving that, because I cannot go watch a game in public. I just can't. It's too tense for me. I have to watch it in the privacy of my own home, where I can have my own emotions, get into my own feels about it. And it would not be safe for me at Buffalo Wild Wings.
I'm typically like that as well, but I had my expectations set at a very healthy level for this matchup with Gonzaga. So I just kind of went into it like, hey, you know what, man, I'm just going to relax, let it be what it is. Because Oklahoma, here's the thing, man, let's not bury the lead. Oklahoma made it, not to the second round, John. No, they were on day 2. They were in the tantalizing 24. Okay.
That's right.
Why does the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 get all the cool names? Why can't we go tantalizing 24 if you make it to day 2 of the second round,
Yeah.
My only regret for Oklahoma is that they didn't get to play the last game on Monday.
Oh, man.
And maybe they could have made it to the sensational 17. You know what I mean? So, there's a lot of ways to spin this. I'm a spin doctor. I'll spin it however we need to right now, because I want to be positive in segment 1, because I got some things I didn't like, and we'll talk about that next segment, but let's be positive in segment 1.
Yeah, I mean, you got to like the way that the Oklahoma Sooners came out of the gate and played that game. I mean, they just came right at Gonzaga, just played with no fear, got out to an early lead, big 8-point lead early in the first half. And man, you're turning on that game and you're watching that early first half and you're thinking, okay, this team, they're going to play with them today.
Yeah, as good of a start as you could possibly ask for when you're coming out playing undefeated number 1 in the country. Austin Reeves gets an and 1 going into the first media timeout. Oklahoma's up 16-12. He comes back, hits that first free throw. So essentially in the first 4 minutes of the game, you've got 17 points on the board. Mm-hmm. And, yesterday we came on in the preview and said, you got to score 80 to have a chance to win this ball game. Well, man, you're almost 25% of the way to 80 4 minutes in. So they were hot. They were moving the ball. Emoji Gibson's knocking down shots. Austin Reeves just looked like, this may sound blasphemous to somebody, but he had some Pistol Pete-esque finishes around the rim. He had the hair flowing, like the old school Pistol Pete stuff. But that one up and under where he went and finished on the other side of the basket, fantastic.
Yeah, after taking contact.
As good as it gets, some of the finishes he was making. And he came out possessed. And really, to me, everything changed when he got that second foul on what I felt like was a bogus offensive foul. I feel like that was one of those, he was going so hard to the basket so well that he was wearing them out. There was a couple of times he didn't get an and one. He just backed down and hit a quick little jumper where he kind of did a pivot, hit a jumper about 8-footer. And another time he finished at the rim without a foul. And then he had 2 and ones. So he was 4 for 4, all going to the basket. Then he gets that other and one that they take off the board and call an offensive foul. And I felt like that was one of those where the referee just kind of got tired of giving him the call. It's kind of like, well, we've given him 2 and ones. This one we're going to give the other way. Because maybe it was 50-50. And that's just referees being referees, where it's almost like the same thing. You'll see it all throughout a game. They call a block charge. They kind of just try to keep this ratio in their head. So he was just a victim of that, in my opinion. But when he had to go to the bench with those 2 fouls, that to me is really where things just started slipping away. And when he came back in the game, it was hard to recreate what they had going.
Yeah. And I mean, we can talk about whether it was the right call to put him on the bench with 2 fouls, because we've seen this team play with a lot of fouls, in the second half of game with 3 and 4 fouls at times, and Lon Kruger just continued to roll with them. But let's talk about that in the second segment, because I've got questions about that. But it seemed like, defensively, I felt like they were really doing a really good job at moving with Gonzaga, at least staying aggressive, getting hands on the ball, getting hands into passing lanes. They were doing everything that you would hope that they would do. Again, we kind of spoke about this through text off the air, just that they played with a lot of heart in this game and against a really, really good Gonzaga team. I think maybe we underestimated them, and maybe we didn't, but we just didn't know what to expect with Gonzaga. But they are, as advertised, they are a fantastically deep basketball team that can score with a lot of different guys. And I think that's the biggest issue that Oklahoma faced in this game, is that they didn't have enough guys that could score. Yeah,
and I'll give you 2 additional things that I liked outside of Austin Reeves' aggressiveness, and really Austin Reeves' game, period. 27 points, 11 of 16 from the field, very aggressive, was a total warrior. Like, I can't say enough good things about Austin Reeves' performance today. But I also felt like the team in general, the heart that they played with, is something every Sooner fan should be proud of, because that team could have easily gotten blown out by 25 today. And they battled back, stayed in it. They got down 19, cut it to 9, 2 different times, had the ball a couple times to cut into that lead, just couldn't get a shot to go down. But yes, Gonzaga is as good as advertised, and then some. Like, you literally cannot have any weaknesses in Oklahoma without Davion Harmon. It was going to be an uphill battle. But the other thing I liked was Alondas Williams came in and gave him 15 points. Had a really sweet dunk on the baseline at the end of the half that didn't count. Barely, he actually dunked it so well that he cocked it back a little too far. It didn't beat the shot clock buzzer. But, man, 15 points from him. You couldn't ask for a better contribution off the bench than what you got from him. So that was something I enjoyed. But really, at the end of the day, to me, it was the heart. It was Elijah Harkless. It was the hustle. The kind of the things we talked about early in the season with this team when they were making that run of beating all those top 10 teams. That old school Kelvin Sampson hustle and hardwood. That's what kept them in this basketball game today, was that effort, that energy level. And, it's just unfortunate that they couldn't win. But, man, when you're up against that kind of a team, then that's just the way it goes sometimes. It's a kind of like honorable discharge from the tournament to go down to Gonzaga.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely no shame in losing that matchup. You get 11 points from Jalen Hill. And these are 2 guys that have been really underwhelming, I would say, the last kind of couple months of the season. But to get, contributions like they did from Alondas Williams and Jalen Hill was fantastic, because they, and we'll talk about it coming up in the next segment, but they didn't get anything out of Brady Manick. So yeah, coming up in the next segment, we will talk about the things we didn't like from this game. In the third segment, we're going to talk a little bit about where does Oklahoma go from here? Who stays, who goes? What's this team's outlook coming up in the future? But before we do that, I want to talk to you a little bit about our friends over at rockauto.com. Rockauto.com is a family business serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. Go to rockauto.com to shop for auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers. They have everything from engine control modules and brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. The rockauto.com catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle and choose the brands, specifications, and prices you prefer. Best of all, prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low, and the same for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Why spend up to twice as much at a storefront auto parts store when you can go to rockauto.com and save? So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. And I also want to talk to you about our friends over at Country Leisure. Are you ready to get your summer backyard oasis set up? I mean, we're in March Madness. If you're an Oklahoma Sooners fan, it's now March Sadness because they've been eliminated from the tournament. But it's not too late to begin getting your pool, your hot tub set up for summertime. Do you feel like your family spent too much time inside the last few months? Well, there's no better time like the present to get into pool ownership. And the people at Country Leisure can get you set up. Located in Moore, Oklahoma, they've been the best in the industry for 35 years. They have great customer service, and education is a top priority for them. And they can get you installed in one day in most cases. You might be asking yourself, why would I look into an above ground pool? Well, it's the least expensive way into pool ownership, and it's a much quicker installation process. You can save money, but you can still get all of the luxury and relaxation that you deserve by going to Country Leisure. You ever thought about getting a hot tub? Well, now's the time to enhance your well-being, reduce your body aches, and get closer to your family and friends. Now that everything's just opening back up, now's the time to get ready for your cookouts, your outdoor parties for the summertime. Talk to the people at Country Leisure. So you can go to their website, countryleisureMFG.com, or you can call or text at 405-799-7745, located off of I-35 in Moore, Oklahoma. Country Leisure, just add water.
Get all the sports news you need in under 20 minutes with the Locked On Today podcast. Host Peter Bukowski updates you on the latest news in every major sport with the help of our local experts. Follow the Locked On Today podcast wherever you get podcasts.
And now coming into this segment, womp womp, we got to talk about some of the things that we did not like from this game. We liked some of the intangible things that Oklahoma did, and we talked about that in the first segment, but in reality, there was just so many things that just fell short for Oklahoma in this game. And David, I'll let you kick it off. Just share one thing with me, first of all, that you didn't like from this game.
Well, unfortunately, it's the same song, seventh verse of a big game where Oklahoma needed a guy to show up and he was unable to do so. And look, this is not an attack personally. I don't have any issue with Brady Manick off the floor, but man, when you're a senior, when you're a 4-year starter and it's March Madness and you're playing the number one team in the country and you finish the game with 3 more points than a dead man, that ain't good. And especially when you're down your second leading scorer and your partner in crime, your other seniors, Alondis Williams, 15 points. Austin Reeves, 27 points. Kirk Weth, a ton of block shots, incredible energy. 3 other seniors stepped up their game, left it all on the floor, and Brady Manick comes up with 3 points. Look, this was the theme of the season during the stretch where Oklahoma started to fall apart, is Brady Manick. What were you going to get from him? Nobody knew. It was as inconsistent as it could possibly be. And even when he was good, it wasn't good enough for them to get a win. When he was bad, it was enough for them to lose a close game. And it's one of the reasons they ended up being an 8 seed was the inconsistency that he showed all season long. And that unfortunately reared its ugly head again against Gonzaga when there was 0 margin of error. And not only did he come up short on the offensive end, because look, you can say, well, man, guys miss shots. Sure they do. But when you're not able to guard anybody on the other end of the floor, when Tim just drops 30 because you can't cover and you can't get any kind of post defensive position and you're getting pushed in the restricted area on every possession and you're giving up offensive rebound after offensive rebound after offensive rebound, that's a net 0 on both ends of the floor. And there was no positive production today from Brady Manick, and that's unfortunate. And it's really unfortunate because, like I said, you got Davion Harmon sitting in a hotel room tweeting how much he wishes he was out there. And there was just, a lot left to be desired by that performance. And again, not a personal attack. might sound like it. It's just, I'm just calling it like I see it here. We're here to evaluate this team. And that was a glaring weakness on the floor today.
You can't not talk about it when he hits. I think he hit like the first 3-pointer of the game for Oklahoma, and then he goes 0 for 7 the rest of the game. You got to have better from a guy that, I mean, was one of your better players against Missouri, and then he just no shows for 38 minutes of this game. And you have to talk about it. I mean, there's not really much else to say except, yeah, you got to get better from arguably who coming into the season. I think many people thought he was probably the second best player on the team. And we've talked about it. We built it up as well. And yeah, the season went the way it went. He had COVID, was out for a stretch. But after a night like he had against Missouri the other night, we thought, okay, maybe he's back. And then to pretty much no show for the biggest game of the season against the toughest opponent they've seen all year, it's just inexcusable. And I don't know what it is. If it was just, maybe we just thought too highly of him coming into the season. Maybe he's just not as good of a shooter as we thought, but it is really unfortunate because you hate to see a guy potentially go out like that in his last game of the season, but they needed to have more from him. And I think they needed to have more from Emoji Gibson as well. He's another guy, hit a 3 early in the game and then just dead silent the rest of the way. I mean, he couldn't get anything going. I mean, and a lot of credit has to go to Gonzaga as well, especially on their defense on Emoji Gibson, because there were several times that he was trying to use that delay penetration, and they were all over that. They had left him zero room to work with. But I think, yeah, it just guys did not show up. Austin Reeves had to try to carry the load, and he did a remarkable job. I mean, he was Herculean in this game, but he needed to have help from somebody, and there was just nobody else really there to help him. His guys that they had been riding with all year long didn't step up in this matchup.
Yeah, Emoji Gibson definitely deserves some blame. But at the end of the day, man, Emoji Gibson is who he is. Yes, he was a nice story. But at the end of the day, like, he looked like a Sun Belt player today. And that's no knock on the Sun Belt Conference. There's good basketball played there. But when you're in the toughest conference in America and you transfer into that, and then you go and play in March Madness against the number 1 team in the country, then, man, it shows up, okay? There's a reason that Duke, and I know, look, this is a bad example because Duke's not in it this year, but you get my point. Yeah. There's a reason that the blue blood programs aren't relying upon Missouri Valley, Sun Belt, and West Coast Conference transfers to be in their starting rotation and to be their core guys they're relying upon. There's a reason that's not a recipe for success everywhere. Now, Coach Kruger does a great job with transfers. He gets a lot out of those guys. He gets a team to gel, and that's fine. But Emoji Gibson looked like a less talented player against Gonzaga. Gonzaga is just that much better at every position almost on the floor. The only comp was Suggs and Reeves today. Like, those guys were, you could maybe flip a coin and say, hey, man, athletically Suggs is better, but dang, Reeves is a warrior. He's out there battling, putting up 27, just going right at it, guys, finishing strong. So one thing I did not like, and it kind of relates to officiating and also relates to Lon Kruger. And, I'm a big proponent of Lon Kruger. I love his style. I love that he's not a guy that's out there MFing his players. He's not out there making a fool of himself. He doesn't embarrass his kids, which I don't think any coach should be embarrassing their kids. If they're not ready to play at game time and you're having to drop bombs on them to get them fired up, that's your fault. You didn't prepare them well enough.
Yep, agreed.
I don't think that's something he needs to be doing. However, did officials beat Oklahoma today? Absolutely not. The Zags were far better, just a better basketball team. But when you're down a man and your guys are battling like they were battling, they came out hot, and Austin Reeves gets that charge with 11 minutes left in the half, and it's a tie game, and an and one gets taken off the board, and now your best player potentially is going to the bench. His butt is not hitting the seat before I get a technical foul right there. Period. End of story. I'll give Gonzaga 2 free throws, and I will make a point to the officials. I'll make a point to my team that, hey, you know what? Like, we're not going down like that today. Like, you can say whatever you want to say about how this game's going to go from here on out, but this first 9 minutes, we were in it. We came out hot, and you're going to take our best player off the board because you got tired of calling the M1 on a bullcrap call. Well, fine. I'm going to get a technical. I'm going to stand up for my guys because I want them to know I've got their back. It's not about being hard on the officials or being a jerk. It's about, I'm going to send a message to my team that I've got their back. And that is something that I feel like is a major weakness in Lon Kruger's game. For all the great things he gets credit for, he deserves. But this particular area, I've seen it all year long, and I've seen it specifically with Austin Reeves. And if you're an Austin Reeves hater, sorry, you're wrong. Okay, Austin Reeves is a guy that any coach in America would like to have on their basketball team, and you can take that to the bank. So that's just me being as blunt as I can be.
It's just fact.
It's just fact. But when you say, and you look at his season, however many free throws he shot, you could probably add 50 more that he should have gotten. That man, I saw somebody tweet out that he almost has to get stabbed to get to the free throw line.
Yeah.
And it's true. And it's been like that all through conference play. And I have not seen one single time, not once, Lon Kruger call timeout, send his team to the bench, let his assistants take them, and go have a conversation with the referees to stick up for his kids. Never one single time. And that, to me, is something that needs to get fixed. Because if I'm a high school recruit and I'm sitting there watching Austin Reeves game after game, if I'm following Oklahoma, I'm looking at that saying, dang, man, like, what's Austin Reeves got to do to get a call? Like, coach, are you not seeing this? You're not going to say something? I mean, because Austin Reeves is getting frustrated. He's an emotional guy. It was all he could do to contain himself there when he got his fourth foul late in the game on another offensive foul that was marginal. I mean, I just don't understand why there's never a breaking point where it's like, hey, that's the one. And I'm going to send a message that I got my teams back. Because today of all days, when they're battling the number one team in the country, shorthanded, and they're playing their heart out, you got to show them you're with them. And the team, they may have no doubt that he's with them. But to me, as a fan, as a coach's son, as a guy that's seen coaches go get a technical for a strategic reason to show their team something, I just feel like it was a missed opportunity. And, we had a guy, Travis Crosby on Twitter tweet us about that. Like, do we think Lon needs to be more aggressive and have his kids back? I think I answered that question. Yes, emphatically yes. And I think that's something that has to get changed going forward, because the nice guy thing, I love it. I think it's great for the university. I think it's great for the program overall. But there's a time where that has to be put to the side, and you got to go make a point to stick up for your kids.
Well, it's a part of emotional management of a game in any sport. You see it across sports, whether it's the NBA and a coach going out there to get a technical to battle for his guys, or Major League Baseball, the manager going out and getting himself tossed to try and fire up his guys. And in hockey, your captain going out there to pick a fight with a guy just to get his team fired up. Sometimes you just got to do something like that, and you got to know when the right moment is. I've had to do it coaching lacrosse where I felt like, my guys just weren't playing tough enough, and I had to, show them that I had their back in certain circumstances. It's just part of the game. It's part of the management of the game. And yeah, Lon Kruger missed an opportunity really where he could have, kind of lit a fire under his guys by going after the officials. And, it could be one of those areas where maybe that's just not a strength of his. It's out of character for him. So it's not easy for him to see that that's what he needs to do. But that's something that as he goes into the self-evaluation process for this next year, he needs to look at like, hey, could I have stuck up for my guys a little bit more? And if he watches back the film, he could probably say that with a resounding yes. But coming up next, we're going to talk about where did the Oklahoma Sooners go from here? Who should stay? Who should go on to greener pastures? And what do they need to do to get beyond the second round of the NCAA tournament and find themselves in the Sweet 16?
But before we talk more about the future of Oklahoma basketball, I want to tell you about betonline.ag. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. The Sooners might have been knocked out, but the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight are coming right up. The NHL is in full swing. If you're into the NBA, that's your thing. You can bet on all their action. Major League Baseball is about to open up here in the next couple of weeks. So don't sit on the sidelines, get in on that action. And you can also bet on reality TV. They have everything covered, real-time odds, updates at betonline.ag. Use the promo code LOCKED to get a 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit at betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. And also I want to tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is my thing. I'm always on Built Bar. I have a couple of them every day. Before a workout, after a workout, and it's the best tasting protein bar out there, bar none. No pun intended on the bar none, but they got Built Bar Madness going on at bar_built on Twitter. Again, at bar_built on Twitter. Go vote in their daily matchups. Today's matchup, coconut brownie chunk against lemon almond cheesecake. And I'm a sucker for cheesecake. I'm going to take lemon almond cheesecake on this one. But go to builtbar.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order at builtbar.com.
The NFL draft is weeks away. It's time to start following our Locked On NFL Draft duo. The Draft Dudes podcast watches every prospect so that you don't have to. And the Locked On NFL Draft podcast is your daily draft news and mock draft podcast. Want to know where Ronnie Perkins is being projected to go? Follow Locked On NFL Draft and Draft Dudes on the radio.com app or wherever you get your podcasts. And now coming up in the Locked On Sooners podcast, we're going to start talking about where did the Oklahoma Sooners go from here? This is a team that has quite a few seniors. They did make a great, have a good season, not a great season, a good season. Made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament, ran into the juggernaut that is Gonzaga. So we have to ask the question, how far are they from a Sweet 16, a Final Four team? Who should be coming back? Now, David, looking at this team, they've got quite a few seniors, and you put up a poll on Twitter asking about their two most high-profile seniors and whether or not they should come back. And let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, let's do that. So I put out a poll on Twitter to see what the vibe was right after the game, right? You got the extra senior year available. Kirk Weth already said he's going to go play overseas, and I think got some family to support, so he's going to pursue his options. And that leaves Alondas Williams, who outside of his game today, I think has been mostly a non-factor down the stretch for Oklahoma, other than some role player type of performances. But then you had the guys coming in that were kind of the headliners of the year. Austin Reeves, who was a first-team All-Big 12 player, finished with 27 points. And then Brady Manick, who's a 4-year, very accomplished, 1,400-point scorer, 200 threes, came in with Trae Young, went out with 3 points today against Gonzaga. Those are the two guys. I mean, when you're looking at this roster, you're thinking who's going to come back, who might take that extra year. We had Rylan Stiles of Locked On Thunder on earlier during the season as Oklahoma was rising and as they were going into that top 10 run that they made. And he said about Austin Reeves specifically about his NBA potential that for a guy like him, if he's a tweener, sometimes for those guys to come back another year, yes, it might help their skill level, but the NBA is going to look at them as 1 year older and less attractive. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. However, there's a lot of question as to if Austin Reeves has NBA potential either way, right? I mean, is he a guy kind of like a guy I would kind of compare him to, Sooner fans don't get nauseous, but like a Sam Ehlinger, that if Sam Ehlinger had to come back to Texas for a 5th year, I don't know if he's any better of an NFL quarterback after 4 years versus after 5, but he could have made a really cool run at Texas and maybe extended all of his records that would never be broken by having 5 seasons. And Austin Reeves, I think, could come back and have a really nice year at Oklahoma. I think he could maybe be another first team All Big 12, potentially Big 12 player of the year, and really come back and work on his ball handling, some defense, some things that he could tighten up on his game that could take him into potential All-American status. I think that's something that's on the table for him if he wants to come back. Brady Manick, for me, I've seen what I need to see from him, and I don't, this isn't something I think they need to explore with him. I think this is one of those things that I would not give him the option to come back personally. I would say, hey, look, as hard as it is to say a 4-year career, like it was good. It was great, man. It was great for what it was. But for this team to take the next step, like you're talking about, to get to the Sweet 16, to make a run at the Final Four, which they could do, actually. They're not that far away. They've got pieces. You got your junkyard dog defensive stopper in Elijah Harkless. You've got a potential Big 12 player of the year in Austin Reeves. You've got Emoji Gibson that's a nice secondary scorer. You got Davion Harmon, who's a slasher that's going to be a junior, is going to keep getting better. And you got Bijan Cortez coming out of Kingfisher, just won a state title that people feel really good about his game. There's a lot there. And there's going to be a ton of guys in this transfer portal that you can go find some big guys to go with them. You can go find you some 4 and 5s, and you can find you some guys that can defend the post. That whether they can step out and shoot the 3 or not, like Manick could do, you don't need your 4 and 5 to have to do that. You don't have to play small. They played small out of necessity to accommodate Brady Manick's game and to hide Kirk Weth's weaknesses offensively. So that's not something that I think is a recipe for success for them going forward. I think they can do better. Kruger has been good with the transfer portal. He's been good at bringing guys in. They haven't been very good at developing post players. So to me, bringing high school guys in to play the post, like Iwakor, is not the answer. Like, less is Iwakor. right? We don't need more of Iwakor. Less is Iwakor. He's not the answer. He could play for 4 more seasons. He's never going to be an offensive player there. So I think that's something that, for me, I think that Austin Reeves should come back. I think Brady Manick should not be afforded the opportunity to come back, because I don't think, and it's not personal, I just don't think it helps their program. It doesn't push them forward. It doesn't increase their ceiling in 2022. But what I was interested in the poll that we did is that we did, do you want Austin Reeves, Brady Manick, both, or neither? And in the options that did not include Austin Reeves coming back, 19% of voters said they didn't want Austin Reeves to come back next year.
Wow.
Which I find fascinating. Just fascinating.
You may not be able to see it because you might be listening to the podcast, but my head is shaking right now. I just don't get it. All right. I really don't get it. It's like, and again, I think there's some Sooner fans out there that they watch every basketball game that's played. They watch every possession of every basketball game. They have season tickets. They're in the Boom Squad. They're students that listen, that they are ride or die Oklahoma basketball fans that were there for Billy Tubbs and Kelvin Sampson and Capel, the rise, the fall, all of it. I know that those fans are out there. But what I think that 19% represents is the OU football fan that doesn't pay much attention to basketball until it gets close to the tournament and gets a little bit excited when they get a good number by their name and get a big Monday matchup, or they watch the Bedlam games, or they watch them play Texas or Kansas, and they want to get real critical of something that they don't see that they like. And they don't really contextualize it very well in light of the entire season, in light of the personnel around a guy like Austin Reeves. And they want to just do this, oh, well, he needs to pass the ball more. It's ISO ball. And I equated it to when Russell Westbrook was playing with a bunch of nonners on offense for the Thunder when Kevin Durant left. Yep. And he won the MVP, and people say, oh, he needs to get his teammates involved. Yeah, he's put up numbers, but, because people say the same thing. Oh, yeah, Reeves has good numbers, but what about his teammates? And okay, well, the same people that are saying Austin Reeves should pass the ball to Iwakor, to Alondas Williams, to Harkless, great defender, not a good shooter, to Jalen Hill, to Brady Manick most nights, are the same people that were saying Russell Westbrook should pass it to Andre Robertson, who couldn't throw it in the ocean if he was waist deep. So, I mean, it's like you can't please certain people. They want perfection. Yeah. And that 19% that doesn't want Austin Reeves back, again, I'm going to be blunt. I'm going to be real. You couldn't be more wrong on that. Like, not only does this team need him back, but they should do everything they can to say, man, look, I know you might have a future professionally somewhere, but you could really do yourself a great service to your career and make a huge impact. Be a 2-time first-team All Big 12 guy at Oklahoma, and maybe really make a run at the Final Four if you come back next year. That's the pitch they should be giving him. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a step back for Oklahoma's program if Austin Reeves decides to go pro. They don't have anybody like him. I mean, Davion Harmon is a good point guard. I think he's solid, and I think Oklahoma can win some games and potentially make it into the NCAA tournament with Davion Harmon running the point. But at this point in his development, in his career, he's not Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves is a great distributor. He's a good shooter. He's a fantastic finisher, and he brings a mental edge that you need on your team, that leads your team. I mean, a lot of the toughness that you see out of the Oklahoma Sooners is because of him and Elijah Harkless and the toughness that they bring to the basketball court. Austin Reeves, he could go play pro somewhere. It might not be the NBA, but he definitely could play in Europe, China. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made out there for Austin Reeves if he wants to go overseas, if he's not able to make it in the NBA, which I think he could. I mean, that's another conversation for another day. But I think you're absolutely right on Brady Manick, man. I think him staying with Oklahoma is kind of a progress stopper. We talk about that a lot of times in the NFL, about keeping veterans on the roster, holding back younger players. And Brady Manick could be that for this team. I mean, we saw, on Alondas Williams, I mean, he's not a younger player, but a lot of the times he's not necessarily going to get minutes because Brady Manick's on the floor. You can only have so many of those kind of like tweener 4-5, 3-4-5 guys on the floor at one time. But we saw that he's a guy that can finish around the rim. I don't have a lot of confidence that Brady Manick can finish around the rim. With a guy that you have that is as good a passer as Austin Reeves is, and even Davion Harmon, you need guys that can finish around the rim. And that's where Oklahoma really, really struggled at times, is not getting, because Brady Manick had several open looks inside the paint and just wasn't able to finish. King Queth, bow down to him. Fantastic defensive player. He caught the ball in the first half of the game, and he could have just gone up and just jammed it home with a big old tomahawk jam and just threw it up, because he was just shocked at how open he was when he caught the basketball, because he never gets it that open. And so, they need to find some guys that can play in the paint, because that's where Oklahoma really was at their best, is when they were playing in the paint. And if Brady Manick comes back, it just holds them back and it keeps them stagnant to me offensively.
Yeah, you make a good point about Alondes Williams. As we're sitting here having this conversation, obviously he's a senior as well. He has that same potential option. And I would look at him as a guy that I'm like, you know what? At first, I'm kind of thinking, they could probably move on from him. But he's been around there for a couple of years. He's a JUCO guy. So they didn't have him for a full 4 years, whereas Brady Manick has had 4 years on campus and probably capped out a lot earlier than his senior year. Like, I don't think he at some point he stopped getting better. And athletically, he never had that next gear, right? He's not going to be on one shining moment like Alondes Williams is going to be for an incredible dunk. Like, it's just different kind of players. He also doesn't have the kind of aggressive approach that Alondes Williams has, of going to the basket hard, doing things with authority. Even though Alondes Williams sometimes looked completely out of control, at least he was going with a purpose. At least he was being definitive and decisive, and I'm just going to go try to make something happen and not let something happen to me. So Alondes Williams is a guy that, yes, you could probably bring back and put him in your rotation somewhere and be a veteran guy on your team. Then maybe you're not relying upon him to do a lot of heavy lifting, but you know what you're getting from him. And at least athletically, when you run into these teams that might have better talent, you're not going to get out-athleted when Alondes Williams is on the floor, which they were getting out-athleted many times with Brady Manick on post defense, on long rebounds, on loose balls. It's just a half step slow. It's not his fault, just what it is. So to me, Alondes Williams is a guy that I'm kind of 50-50 on. It wouldn't hurt me if they brought him back. It wouldn't bother me if they let him go. But Austin Reeves, man, if anybody in America could take advantage of that extra year that's a senior right now, I think that's the guy. And Oklahoma is not going to have – here's one thing, and we'll cut out of here on this, but, all this stuff about Kruger's teams collapse down the stretch. Everybody wants to look at OSU made a great run to the championship game of the Big 12 tournament. Texas won the Big 12. Who do you want to be? You want to be Texas and get beat by Abilene Christian with the best athletes on the floor, and it wasn't even close that night? Or do you want to be Oklahoma that is fighting tooth and nail and scrappy, and a team that you're proud of that plays with heart? Because you want Coach Kruger to go get more talent and less heart, because that's what some of these teams have, right? So you got to keep some perspective here. Do you want to be Oklahoma State and have to go hire the brother of a great player to get him in the door to have one season, of a shot? Because Oklahoma State's not going to be that next year. That was a 1 year thing for them. They're not going to sustain that. I promise you. I'll be shocked if they're the dance next year. They're just not going to sustain it. But Coach Kruger can sustain it, and he can sustain it and expand upon it because of a guy like Austin Reeves, because of a guy like Harkless, and the buy-in and the continuity that they can build on for next year.
Yeah, you don't throw talent away. You just don't. And Austin Reeves is arguably the most talented player Oklahoma's had since Buddy Hield. And, he's one of the best 5 in the Big 12, with Cade Cunningham going off to the NBA. He arguably maybe the best guard in the Big 12 going into next year, if he's able to stay. And I think Oklahoma should throw a few more Jumpman shoes at him, maybe a few more sweatsuits, a few more hoodies, something like that. Just, I'm sure Lincoln Riley's got some gear that is stashed away in his office for recruits. Go ahead and ship that on over to the basketball program. We're not saying do anything illegal. We're never going to recommend that. But hey, if we can get the NIL through, let's get some name, image, and likeness stuff going for Austin Reeves. And if you want to throw some Jumpman,
you want to throw some Jumpman our way, we'll take some Jumpman. The important thing is we get Austin Reeves back and we do it the right way.
That's right. Yeah. And Michael, if you're listening, if you'd like to sponsor the show, just hit us up on our Twitter account. The DMs are open. And that's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Sooners podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you go and follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Sooners, on Facebook, Locked On Sooners podcast. We're also on Instagram, Locked On Sooners as well. And you can find us on radio.com, Apple, Google, and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure you subscribe to the show and give us a rating as well. We'd love to hear your feedback feedback. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on Oklahoma's basketball season, some of the things that you liked, some of the things you didn't like. So you can hit us up at lockedonsooners@gmail.com or on Twitter. For David Walker, I'm John Williams. We'll catch you on Wednesday. Boomer.
Sooner.